Impressions was set up by me and somebody called Edward Grabowski, with some friends and family supporting in the background, in 1988 as a hobby company. We thought that we could produce games that were better than some of what was being put out at the time, which was mainly coin-op and movie licensed arcade games, and we thought there was some scope for more originality in products than was happening then. We quickly learned to specialize in strategy games as soon as it became clear that the investment in technology we would have to have made to retain a decent position in the arcade market was greater than we wanted to invest at that time, and that, you know, our love, mine and Edward's, was much more on the strategy side. We both played strategy games more than the arcade games. The whole Space Invader type genre on day one was what sucked me in. I loved that stuff. Breakout in particular I think was one of my favorites. All those things. I used to meet with groups of friends, and we'd go out on Saturday nights or Friday nights or whatever, and would meet and play a few games first. And I had one particular friend who was a games programmer, and he had a couple of games published, which kind of got me a little bit interested in the trade side of games publishing and development. There was a peculiarly British computer over there called the BBC Micro Model B, and that shipped bundled with a game called, I think it was called Village or something like that, where people had to make decisions about how much corn to plant, how many people to allocate to defense, how many to irrigation, and how many to various other things, other categories. And that certainly was part of my inspiration later on for Lords of the Realm, because I just loved that game. Our very first published title was a game called Raider, which was an arcade-style game for the Amiga. It involved a spaceship, kind of like the one seen in Asteroids, with the same rotate left, rotate right, and thrust with gravity. But you had to sort of move through different caverns and levels and spaceships, space stations, to try to collect different pods and shoot things that got in your way. And there were very different sort of opening doors and things that would different puzzle elements to solve within that. But it was quite a different style of product from what we'd put out today. A lot of it relates to interface. People bandy about words like intuitiveness, feedback, visual feedback, instant gratification, a lot of broad concepts. What it often boils down to is you know, not having something take 3 or 4 mouse clicks when 1 mouse click will do. I don't like that description, but I think for some of our products in the past it's probably fairly accurate, and I think that going forward you'll see much less of that. When we began in '88, we just thought we would have some fun. It soon became clear within a couple of years that having some fun was fine, but the business of developing games and publishing them is not just a fun thing. You had to take it very seriously indeed, and it is fun, and we try very hard here to have a lot of fun, but you need to take it seriously. First stateside release was a game called Air Force Commander, which we had enhanced and adjusted from the European product, which we called Fighter Command. It was a game of running an air force where in an air-only war. It was a bit of an abstracted situation, but we thought it'd be a lot of fun. Ultimately, if we want to become a mass market business, which I think a lot of people in the industry do want us to become, we're going to have to conquer that issue. It's not on for publishers, whether it's us or somebody else, to release a product full of bugs that doesn't work on some machines, it doesn't work with this sound card or that sound card. We're very excited about Windows 95 and see that fixing a lot of those issues. I don't think it'll be perfect by a long way, but I think it's a very good step in the right direction. First big hit was probably Airbucks, a game about running an airline. A big hit is relative, and you know, what constituted a big hit for us then does not constitute a big hit for us today, but certainly that was our biggest hit over here. Our first major hit over here was Caesar, which did extremely well, won lots of awards, and I think put us on the map in terms of gameplay for a lot of people, very much so. You know, a vast majority of our work is now done in-house over here in the States today, with Americans, most of whom are die-hard strategy gamers themselves. 2.5 years ago, most of our development work was done by freelance development houses and people in the UK and Europe, rather than over here. I think that's significant. The American market has been a PC market for so long now, whereas the European market is only really just becoming a PC market. So up until about 18 months, 2 years ago, most games in Europe were low res, running in an Amiga 500, and just PC conversions of that. And I think if you look at many of the European products that are still coming over today from some of the companies there, you'll still find those same issues apply. Very much so, and it's been a turning point in sales, in consumer and media opinion, critical opinion, and I think that's very much where we're going. If you want to say, well, is there a product today that sums up where you're going? You can look at Lords of the Realm. It was also our first CD project with enhancements, which we were quite proud of for the time. It was low res, and obviously that we're now in a high res world, but nonetheless, I think the interface, the quality of the gameplay, that's very much where we're going. We wanted to put the product out. We thought the product was ready. We didn't think we had modem play on the box. We always had intended to have modem play as a feature in the product, but we decided to ship it without and add modem play later. I think that with hindsight that was a mistake. It really upset some users, and had we known quite how they would have felt, then I don't think we would have done that. Airbucks came out and everyone said, oh, this looks like Railroad Tycoon in the skies. And we said, oh, that's a great compliment. Wonderful, thank you very much. In practice, though, it was more than that. It set up an image of what people were expecting, the consumer, when the product hit. And of course, we never set out to make it Railroad Tycoon in the skies. We wanted to make it a game about running an airline. And so there were drastic differences, and a lot of the consumers, I think, felt misled that what they've been told to expect wasn't their vision of what actually happened, what we actually delivered. And so those comparisons can be awkward sometimes. That's probably our fault. I mean, I think it's up to us to portray the right image, and I think that we're now much more careful about letting people think things if we think that's going to be misleading. I think we haven't got as much credit as I think we have deserved for our graphics historically. We were the first people to really bring 3D rendered graphics and animation sequences to strategy games. I think that our CD enhanced versions that we put out last year with speech and things really did enhance gameplay. I think we've worked hard to make sure that the CD-ROM isn't just a nice intro and then nothing else, but that it does actually give the user a lot more. And I'd like to see us getting more credit for that going forward. XCOM is a wonderful product. Breach 3 is a different product, and they compete only really in the sense that they're squad level games set in space. A tree-structured campaign system, so that you're not just fighting individual missions or linked missions, but there's more of a storyline within any of the campaigns. It obviously links in with Rules of Engagement 2 for those that wanted to. For example, you might give somebody an instruction to move forward towards an objective, and you can give them that command with one of three moods: either do not fire, hold fire, or fire if fired upon, or fire if you get a chance to. And you may well find that you want someone to go and shoot a certain particular alien, but along the way, while going towards that, this Marine sees an alternative target and decides to go for it. Or this Marine happens to be a bit of a coward and decides that his target that he's been given is a little bit too much for him, and he's going to avoid that, and he won't. I think Windows does an awful lot for game players that a lot of game players probably don't realize yet. I think there are standards in terms of the way that people play the game that just make them easy to fall into, easy to pick up and learn. I think there's a crispness to the graphics that is unsurpassed in the field of strategy gaming. A really kind of slightly dark kind of futuristic business game. I think there's a lot of novels and movies written about that darker side of business, and I don't know to what extent that's accurate. I'm sure to an extent it is, particularly if you get into arms trading or something, but we're talking about the control of the world's power, and things don't get as much more basic and core than that, and that's such an essential part of how the world runs, that the game is a lot about power grabbing. Hence the name Powerhouse. If you take Caesar 1 today and say, well, this is a very good game, but what was wrong with it? I think there are a number of things. I think the interface was poor. With hindsight, I think the graphics were okay with hindsight, and I think that the combat model in the game was really, frankly, pathetic. You don't like to use a word like that, but with hindsight, that's certainly, I think, the case. And all three of those elements have been radically upgraded. We're using a lot of 3D rendered graphics. With Caesar 2, there are different zooming levels, so you can see buildings in more close-up if you wish to. There's a lot more animation going on at that city level, so you'll see groups of soldiers marching around, you'll see people pulling carts around, walking around, going about their everyday business. It's clear that for strategy games in particular, graphics are secondary, and they must be secondary. The key thing is gameplay. If the game is wonderful looking but has no gameplay, it's worthless. However, I don't think that we as the developer and publishers should rely on the gameplay and say, you don't need the graphics, so we're not going to give them to you. Why not give them both? What a concept. And that's what we're trying to do, and I think we're achieving with Caesar 2 and the current projects.